Hey AP Gov class, it's Lauren, and I'm here to talk to you about the Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission court case and the impact the decision had on the electoral process. First off, let's start with some background on the case. In the 2010 Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission court case, Citizens United sought an injunction against the FEC and the U.S. District Court to prevent applications of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act to its film Hillary the Movie. In an attempt to regulate big money campaign contributions, the BCRA applies a variety of restrictions to electioneering communications. Section 203 of the BCRA prevents corporations or labor unions from funding such communication from their general treasuries. Sections 201 and 311 require the disclosure of donors such as communication and a disclaimer when the communication is not authorized by the candidate it intends to support. The United States District Court denied the injunction. Section 203 on its face was not unconstitutional because the Supreme Court in the McConnell v. FEC had already reached that determination. The District Court also held that the movie was the functional equivalent of express advocacy as it attempted to inform voters that Senator Clinton was unfit for office, and thus Section 203 was not unconstitutionally applied. Lastly, it held that the sections 201 and 203 were not unconstitutionally applied to the movie or its advertisements. The court reasoned that the McConnell decision recognized that disclosure of donors might be unconstitutional if it imposed an unconstitutional burden on the freedom to associate in support of a particular cause. But those circumstances did not exist in the Citizens United claim. In the Citizens United v. FEC, the Supreme Court is trying to answer the following questions. 1. Did the Supreme Court's decision in McConnell resolve all constitutional as-applied challenges to the BCRA when it upheld the disclosure requirements of the statute as constitutional? 2. Do the BCRA's disclosure requirements impose an unconstitutional burden when applied to electioneering requirements because they are protected political speech and not subject to regulations as campaign speech? 3. If a communication lacks a clear plea to vote for or against a particular candidate, is it subject to regulation under the BCRA? And 4. Should a feature-length documentary about a candidate for political office be treated like the advertisements at issue in McConnell and therefore be subject to regulation under the BCRA? With a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court reversed the previous decision in the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce, as well as the McConnell v. FEC. The court ruled that the First Amendment cannot limit the amount of funding corporations give to support political broadcasts and candidate elections. The justices wrote that political speech is indispensable to a democracy, which is no less true because the speech comes from a corporation. The court still upheld the ban on corporations and unions giving direct funding to a candidate, as well as the disclosure requirements for political advertising sponsors. The decision of the Supreme Court changed the electoral process by allowing for large sums of money to be used in the electoral system. A majority of justices made it clear that they viewed outside spending on election ads as free speech that didn't present any serious danger of corruption. Essentially, the justices cemented an already existing distinction between donations to candidates and parties, which can be capped by law, and money spent independently by outside entities. Individuals, nonprofits, unions, and corporations, which can't be capped, according to the court. Yet the logic of the Citizens United majority holds that as long as a huge donation isn't given directly to the politician or a party, but is merely spent independently on the politician's or party's behalf, there is no danger of corruption serious enough to justify restricting that exercise of speech. These arguments, however, didn't persuade a majority of the court, and soon after the decision, outside spending, already trending upward, exploded as super PACs and dark money began to play a greater and greater role in U.S. elections. First, a subsequent lower court ruling applying the Supreme Court's logic led to the creation of the super PACs, which are technically called independent expenditure-only committees. These new outside groups could accept unlimited contributions from individuals and corporations, so long as they did not give any money directly to candidates. These groups, which have to disclose their donors to the FEC, have spent hundreds of millions on elections since they were first created in 2010. Since 2010, they have spent more than $1 billion over the past 3 election cycles, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Even after Citizens United, any group with the primary purpose of spending on elections is theoretically supposed to register as a PAC or super PAC and disclose the identities of its donors. But nonprofits that advocate on policy issues, for instance, environmental groups or government groups, are allowed to spend some of their money on campaign ads. They can do so by registering as social welfare groups under Section 501c4 on the tax code, and they don't have to publicly disclose their donors. Spending of this sort from issue advocacy groups has been common for decades. Recently, however, groups have used the social welfare section of the tax code to spend increasingly large sums of money on elections or ads attacking candidates of one party. Other similar groups have been formed as business leagues under Section 501c6 of the tax code, but both have the benefit of evading disclosure requirements to better keep the identities of donors secret. In 2010, super PACs spent almost $62,641,448. In 2012, super PACs spent $609,417,654, and in 2014, they spent $345,117,042. Second, there was a huge increase in spending from nonprofits that don't disclose their donors, popularly nicknamed dark money. Groups like this register under a part of the tax code for social welfare or business league organizations. They have spent some money on campaigns before the decision, but the spending existed in a sort of legal way. Citizens United cleared away much of this fog, though, and was interpreted as giving a green light for many of these groups to ramp up their spending. Many wealthy individuals who want to spend lots of money on politics still see one big problem with super PACs. Donations to them have to be made public, so dark money groups, nonprofits that keep their donors secret, have proved an increasingly popular way for wealthy donors to anonymously spend on politics in recent years, particularly after the 2010 Citizens United decision. In 2004, the reported dark money spending on federal elections was $5,877,189. In 2008, it was $69,187,031. And in 2012, it was $310,800,000. Even after Citizens United, any group with the primary purpose of spending on elections is theoretically supposed to register as a PAC or super PAC and disclose the identities of its donors. But a combination of gridlock polarization in Congress, bipartisan paralysis at the FEC, and lack of action from the IRS have allowed even more questionables of these nonprofits, many of which were seemingly formed entirely to let donors spend anonymously on politics, to run rampant elections without disclosing their funders. Overall, groups that don't disclose their donors have spent well over $600 million in federal elections since 2010, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. This is a lowball estimate because, unlike super PACs, these nonprofits don't have to disclose all of their activity to the FEC. Any ads that run close to the election and mention a candidate for federal office must be reported. But nonprofits don't have to even report ads harshly criticizing candidates so long as A, the ads run 60 days or more before an election, and B, the ads don't explicitly advocate for a vote or against the politician. With both super PACs and dark money in play, the electoral process has become increasingly corrupt, which is the opposite outcome the Supreme Court wanted from the Citizens v. FEC court case.